Good evening, everyone. I don't know where to start with this. I try to formulate these things and try to structure myself to rein myself in these certain moments. But with so much that's been happening in this past week and getting back into work, don't seem to have the patience to tolerate these stories without mentioning or commenting or ranting or raving over it. So I don't know how long this is going to be. I'm going to try to limit myself to a few items, but what the hell, people? What the hell? So let's start with the fallout from Sharpie Gate. Yes. Sharpie Gate was funny. It was amusing. Sharpie Gate produced really creative memes for people who came out and produced them, and we all laughed at them. They were all good. Trump with Sharpied abs to show that he had lost so much weight. Trump's map of the United States with a Sharpie wall. And all that's great. The story of it coming to being is stupid. It is stupid. It is. I would suggest that it would be one of those things to be distracting, like all his racist assholery towards the squad that he did, while to distract you up here, while stuff underneath was happening that was not in the headlines, and he didn't want to be in the headlines. But as I was going into this, no, this is not like that. At least not anymore. See, what was a stupid story that we could laugh at ends up being something a lot more darker, and an example of how tenuous our democracy is at this moment. That an organizational institution that is not political in any way could get themselves threatened because they dared contradict the President of the United States by exerting facts. Alright? So will we dive into this? We'll rehash it. So, last Sunday, the President came out and first did a tweet of the states that Dorian was going to hit, which included Alabama. Minutes after that tweet, a meteorologist from Birmingham contradicted it, saying no, it's not going to hit Alabama. That it's not on the track to hit Alabama in any way. Trump said it a second time on that Sunday, and then on the third time he said it, he was at the FEMA meeting, and he really emphasized Alabama, a few states, and then the great state of Alabama might be hit harder than they even anticipated. Okay. So, a few other meteorologists get involved in this, saying no, the track does not have it hitting anywhere near Alabama. And then that's when the charts came out. Now, it's interesting that this one chart gets seen. It's almost like a before and after. Before, it shows the relative approach of Dorian, and it was suspected to hit Florida and then do its turn north. But then the second one, infamously enough, has the Sharpie, that in order to connect to Alabama. When that brought up the debacle, then a few days later, Trump brings out another chart via Twitter, which I guess was trying to say was the basis of him saying that it was Alabama, and it was a spaghetti string chart of all the different tracks that Dorian was supposedly going to make. Now, this is funny for a few reasons. One, if this was the chart that he was really inspired to say this on Sunday, that's really weird because that chart was 4 days older than that Sunday, which means Dorian wasn't even at the Bahamas yet and hadn't done its devastation yet. And that was back when we just had no idea where it was going. By the time it was at Sunday, the track was getting more and more clear that Dorian was going to hug the coast and then skirt its way north. So there's that. The other funny thing about that chart is that if it was really the basis of him worrying about Alabama or suggesting Alabama, then why didn't he warn Mississippi or Arkansas or Tennessee? Because according to that spaghetti stram chart, they're also in line to being hit, assumedly. Also, why not mention, the Gulf of Mexico or east side of Texas? That's bad president. I'm not mentioning any of that. Bad. But be that as it may, the thing that is galling about all this, from my perspective, as obviously somebody who is not a supporter of Trump, who disapproves of his running as a president, I find him both unqualified and disqualified to being president. However, in the instance when he first said Alabama, that was just a mistake. That was a human error. And I can forgive a human error. We make them all the time. We can get some faulty information and present it, and when we are presented with facts, we can own up to our mistake and admit that this is old information. Of course he doesn't apologize, but I misinformed of the information, and it's really like this. Human responses like that, adult responses like that, but no, we don't get that. So, from the rehashing to this becoming sadly, pathetically funny from Sharpie Gate, where it goes dark is us finding out that Trump pressed his staff to pressure the NOAA to disavow the statements of their meteorologists. Alright, this is from the New York Times. Washington. The Secretary of Commerce threatened to fire top employees at the federal scientific agency responsible for weather forecasts last Friday after the agency's Birmingham office contradicted President Trump's claim that Hurricane Dorian might hit Alabama, according to 3 people familiar with the discussion. That threat led to an unusual unsigned statement later that Friday by the agency, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, disavowing the National Weather Service's position that Alabama was not at risk. The reversal caused widespread anger within the agency and drew accusations from the scientific community that the National Weather Service, which is part of the NOAA, has been bent to political purposes. The NOAA's statement on Friday is now being examined by the Commerce Department's Office of Inspector General, according to documents reviewed by the New York Times, and employees have been asked to preserve their files. The NOAA is a division of the Commerce Department. The National Weather Service must maintain standards of scientific integrity, the Inspector General Peggy E. Gustafson wrote in a message to the NOAA staff members in which she requested documents related to Friday's statement. The circumstances, she wrote, calls into question the NWS's processes, scientific independence, and ability to communicate accurate and timely weather warnings and data to the nation in times of national emergencies. The Commerce Department dispute the account on behalf of the Secretary of Commerce, William L. Ross, Jr. Secretary Ross did not threaten to fire any NOAA staff over forecasting and public statements about Hurricane Dorian, the department said in a statement issued by a spokesman. The spokesman declined to comment on whether Mr. Ross had spoken with the NOAA administrator or ordered the agency to rebut the statement contradicting the president's assertion about the threat to Alabama. The Commerce Department Office of the Inspector General did not comment to requests for comment late Monday. The accusations against Mr. Ross are the latest development in the political imbroglio that began more than a week ago when Dorian was bearing down on the Bahamas and Mr. Trump wrote on Twitter that Alabama would be hit harder than anticipated. A few minutes later, the National Weather Service in Birmingham, Alabama, posted on Twitter that Alabama will not see any impacts from Dorian. We repeat, no impacts from Hurricane Dorian will be felt across Alabama. Okay. Again, all of this is stemming from a mistake. Okay? A mistake that we can forgive. But since he refuses to acknowledge the mistake and not only is pressing his people to compel the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Agency to say, oh no, don't listen to them. No, of course Alabama was in the path. Of course. They do our weather. Okay? This is not a political organization. These are your weathermen. These are the scientists that help explain where weather is coming from, where the paths of hurricanes are going, where the cold fronts are, where the warm fronts are, where's the high pressure, where's the next big band of rain or snow. They have no interest whatsoever in politics. The only reason why they were bringing that up because that information was faulty, and they wanted to clarify to the people of Alabama that there will not be a direct or indirect strike of Dorian to them whatsoever, which was true on Sunday. The faulty material that we're going to assume Trump was talking about, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt that he was talking about the spaghetti chart, was 4 days older than Sunday. But no. His reality cannot be denied, not by his staff or his advisors, and so they have to run with what he says. So now there are talks of people wanting Wilbur Ross to resign. Since the man has been seen on camera falling asleep in cabinet meetings, maybe he should retire anyway. But this is becoming one of those, another example of how Trump doesn't listen to advisors. He doesn't want to listen to advisors. He doesn't want people in positions of authority, even when they're under him, that people will look to them in their establishment for productivity, let's say. And they're supposed to tell the president of the things that they want to advise him, and then he's supposed to decide from their information and move forward. But the situation with that seems reversed. Now, anyone around him, I don't know how many actual installed, fully membered of his cabinets or the departments he has, because he likes acting. He totally likes acting. It gives him an edge. It's flexible. The detriments of people in acting positions as opposed to full-fledged department heads or cabinet heads is, if they're not installed completely, then they don't get the budget that they can use discretionary towards their departments. They don't get the proper amount of staff underneath them, as they have no real authority. So they're kind of existing hand over fist, and it turns out the only reason why they're there is that for them to dictate what Trump wants. Trump wants them to do this, and they will do that, and then they will genuflect back to him. As a lot of these agencies, like the EPA, gets gutted, and the people that run it hate the EPA anyway. It's these kind of situations that lead to us going back a few weeks ago to the death of Jeffrey Epstein and wondering why the jail that he was at was so dysfunctional. Well, it's partially because Trump didn't want there to be a full head of the prisons. So he had an acting who did not have the money for a full-fledged staff. So therefore you had people who were not even prison guards being scabbed as prison guards. And we still don't know what's going on with that. But we'll digress from that. But what else is going on? Especially on this hallowed day, or it was the hallowed day of 9/11. Un momento. Time in. So, what was going to happen on 9/11 was that apparently there was going to be a great meeting at Camp David with Trump and the Taliban. And that got scuttled. The meeting itself, I don't know how many people were actually for this other than Trump, because apparently Trump himself came up with the idea. Again, his advisors don't advise him, he advises the advisors. So he was going to have the people who sheltered Osama bin Laden, who gave them space in Afghanistan to train Al-Qaeda and protected them while they did their mission on 9/11. President Trump was going to have them on American soil in Camp David. That's great, isn't it? It's not a matter of wanting to do a peace treaty or peace deal. That's not the problem. Trump wanting us to get out of Afghanistan, not necessarily a problem in of itself. I think a lot of presidents had a goal for that. At least the last few, that's between now and 9/11. But unlike Trump, who doesn't think with nuance or understands that there are different facets that are going on, which makes diplomacy a little bit tricky than just saying, I want this to happen. Or if you don't make this happen, I'm just going to pout. And I'm going to tweet at you. No. There are a little bit of details that need to be ironed out. One being, the Afghani government wasn't involved in this. They weren't really interested in getting involved in a deal with the U.S. and the Taliban. That would affect them directly. But Trump, who is not really America first, he's more of perceptional Trump first, this was going to be his Sadat at Camp David moment with Jimmy Carter. Alright? And the Palestinians and the Israelis together for those first peace talks. This was going to be Trump's Trump talk with Trump and the Taliban. That was going to be great. When it wasn't. And since things got a little bit too complicated for the stable genius, well, things are thrown up in the air. Now, of course, it's funny that this was all done in secret. So secret that our stable genius president, our chosen one, decided to tweet about it when it fell through. Maybe we should know about this even when it falls through. But, be that as it may, this is what he does. He tweeted out a picture of an Iran facility that got blown up through an accident. And did some little snarky comments about that, because Lord knows we can't expect him to be a 72-year-old man or anything. But one of the interesting fallout things about this is that John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, is now gone. Yes. He's another one of these people who was an independent thinker, who wasn't a complete Trump toady, who had his own agenda, And since his agenda didn't quite jive with Trump, well, Trump kicked him to the curb. And again, this wouldn't be as big of a news if there wasn't contradicting reports on how his departure was. I mean, you get to see the videotape of when the White House spokesman went out and did like this. Jesus, I don't know if it was like 45 seconds of like an announcement, like on the lawn, that John Bolton is no longer the national security advisor. He took like one question and then he just blurbed out the party line or the Trump line, and then he immediately scurried away. And at the same time, an hour or so later, Pompeo was out there with Mnuchin, and they talked about they're trying to calm people down, that just because Bolton was in there, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything to the rest of the world. Don't think that we're in chaos because we let go the national security advisor. We're okay. We're stable. There's some palace intrigue going on. That Pompeo was smiling a little bit too much when talking about his colleagues' rapid departure. The thing about it was that this particular meeting was set, and Bolton was supposed to be there. And when the meeting was advertised the night before, and about an hour after that advertisement, that's when Bolton either gave his resignation or Trump fired him, because we now have like two different stories of how he leaves. Bolton, to his credit, is not one of these people who is a true toady. So yeah, he will defend his version of how he leaves the White House. But don't cry tears for John Bolton. John Bolton is a bloodthirsty war hawk. He was spoiling for us to get into military's boot on the ground in Iran. He was spoiling for us to get into a direct military conflict with North Korea. What John Bolton didn't realize, whenever he was revving Trump up and Trump was doing the tweets, is that, we're going to be gung-ho, we're going to threaten this, we're going to threaten that. He didn't realize that President Trump does not want the responsibility of a war. He does not want the responsibility for anything. He will only take responsibility and credit for successes. Then he will put his stamp of approval on it. It was all on him. Like the vote last night that finally gave us a congressman to go forward in North Carolina, and turned out to be a Republican that won it. Trump took full credit for it. Now, the funny part of this, okay? Alright, Trump won the state, or the district this guy was in, by 12 points. Alright? Mitt Romney won it by 12 points beforehand. This guy, as of 2019, barely scraped by a win with 2 points. Meaning, and the vote beforehand, which the seat got up in the air because of allegations of corruption. That race was also massively close in 2018. So, as much as it's a win, a victory, it is a anemic victory, meaning that Democrats is climbing in that district. And it's kind of amazing. It's one of those things is that, you won, but give it a year or two. It's the same things like happening in Texas, where some of these the race with Beto was close, and it shouldn't have been close in Texas. But there's a lot of places in Texas that is rapidly turning purple between now and 2020. So much so that there's a Texas Brexit going on, where Texan Republican politicians are quitting. They're throwing up their hands. Now, whether or not that means that their replacements that he's going to run for their seats is going to be any better or worse on the Republican side, unless they're going to be more Trumpy, that remains to be seen. But yeah, if it's a success, then Trump will be all over it like the tax deal. The tax cut. Oh, that was all Trump. No, that was not all Trump. Actually, Trump had little to do with it. That was the Senate Republicans blowing up the nuclear option in order to make it work. But, they'll take credit anyway. But they won't take credit for things that would go south. Like when the tankers were being hijacked by, we assume, the Iranians, and the American drone went down. Well, he was gonna go in there. There was gonna be some airstrikes. We're gonna strike the place. And up to the last point, and they say that he stopped because he asked them on that last minute, "Oh, do you think someone is going to die? Well, I don't want anyone to die." And then he reversed the order. Then he didn't reverse the order. Then he did reverse the order. Then because whatever the papers said that he needed to get the headline for. But in reality, he did not want the responsibility that it could lead to further conflict, further war. Remember, one of the first operations under the Trump administration that was going on, that was planned during the Obama administration but was executed under Trump, was that raid in Yemen. And he wasn't even in the Situation Room. He was out in Mar-a-Lago, and he was getting updates at dinner. And the raid was more or less a disaster with some collateral civilian damage. And, well, not my responsibility. Nope, those are generals. All the generals' fault. Mr. He who has all the best generals. So, with Bolton being gone, who did contradict Trump on a number of issues, when Trump did his grand walk down to DMZ from escorting Kim Jong-un from North Korea to South Korea for that photo op that at least everyone on the right was so giddy about. Never mind that other presidents could have done that too, but they didn't want to because they did not want to give Kim that level of exposure, of recognition as a world leader when he's a despot. And Bolton didn't agree with that either, because Bolton wants war. He disagreed with Trump's idea, even though he talks tough with Iran, saying, he might talk with Iran. Well, I don't know, maybe. With no conditions, maybe. And the mustache didn't like that either. But it's... Here's the thing about that, because it's sort of a good-bad situation with this. Is it good that Bolton is out? Yes. Because he is a war hawk that wants us to be in a war. He's a Tom Carton with a mustache. He would sabotage the Iran deal in order to keep up this necessity to be hostile. For the benefits of their politics and, friends in Israel, I guess. I don't think all Israelis want themselves to get into any more conflicts because they have to deal with what's across their literal street. It goes back to the weird blinders that we wear, where in its knee-jerk that we can't see anything bad that the Israeli government does because that would be anti-Semitic. Has nothing to do with the Hebrew religion. It has nothing really to do with the Israeli people. We feel for them as much as we feel for anyone who's in a constant state of not knowing what corner to turn down to if there's going to be someone trying to stab you or someone blowing up a disco or a pizza place. Now, we had that for years and years and years at this conflict with the Palestinians. But on the same token, the government also does various things that are quite inhumane, but we're not supposed to mention that. We're not supposed to mention how, Israeli lobbyist firms try to influence our politics. Why can't we be adults here? It's nothing to do with these people who believe in Judaism. It's not as anti-Semitic to criticize a government. We criticize governments all the time. We still do it. Our president is loaded with that. But is there some divine thing that I'm missing here? I mean, there are some end of the world rapture folk out there that just wants there to be a whole Jerusalem because that's when the end times are supposed to come, and they want to work for that because they think they're going to be the 140,000 or so Christians saved to reign, while the rest of us go up in flames. We talk about death cults in North Koreans' own family, but I don't know. This is just a layman view of this. But that's the thing. Bolton could be like one of that. Wanting to get into a conflict either for that or for our continuing that conflict with Iran with us. Well, maybe he's a war profiteer. There are still some people who are still alive who were in positions of power during the Cold War, and remember how the Red Threat made money. Maybe he was one of them. I don't know. I'm just ranting here. So, what else is going on in the news? Alright, time in for this, and this will be the last item. It'll be actually a pair of items, but this is the last overall item for this. And I'll do more stuff later, but this is I'm gonna end on this. Hurricane Dorian. It's Category 5 when it hit the Bahamas. And when it hit the Bahamas, it didn't just skirt its way across it, leaving its devastation. It sat there, stagnant, churning and destroying island after island after island of the Bahamas. The official death count, at least the last I heard, was like about 44, but official does not scratch the surface, and there were thousands of people missing. And as a result, there was thousands of people who were leaving the islands, and they were going to come here. Now, the Trump administration was threatening last few days to not let certain amounts of these Bahaman refugees in. Some were not going to get the temporary protective status. Some of them were going to be denied that, and even if they landed on these shores, would be detained because they would not have the proper documentation. Oh no! Would you expect them, when their homes are devastated, that you think they would have their documentation like on them? Apparently, some that do will be allowed in, and they'll be allowed the working status, so they'll be able to work while they're here, until they're prepared to go back, as we done with other refugees. And now Trump makes it public that no, he's not going to allow protective status for the majority of these refugees. Boy, Syrians? Central and South American migrants? And what is his reasonings? Well, it sounds eerily similar to what he talks about the migrants. Well, there could be gang members in there. We don't know who's in there. There could be some real bad dudes in there. They are people who lost their homes. I know this is all central on you, and you think this is still a winning thing with your base, your little 39% cut of the country that just collapse when people of color who are in desperate needs get shoved in their face off of our border. We already know all the info and the articles of how you desperately want the situation with the migrants at the border to be as horrible as humanly possible. And it's not beyond my realm of imagination how you turn a blind eye, or maybe you smirk a little bit about the abuses that happen to these people that are maybe by just the accidental leaving of apathetic and sadistic people who are watching over these people that you needlessly are detaining. Or maybe it's by command, because you just want to make it so god-awful that no one should dare come to this border who's not from Norway. And if you think all that's just hyperbole from me, that you think that no, the activities and actions of this president, of this administration, and their people towards the Bahaman refugees is nothing like what's happening with the migrants? Come here. They have started separating children from families of Bahaman refugees. Talking Points memo. A Bahaman child is currently being detained in a Florida facility after immigration officers separated her from her family, who had sought refuge from the devastation of Hurricane Dorian. The Miami Herald reported on Tuesday that after 12-year-old Keturah Paul arrived at West Palm Beach with her grandmother this weekend, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol agents separated the two and refused to let the girl's aunt pick her up at the airport because neither of the women were her mother. Then the agent sent her to his house children's home, an HHS-run migrant detention center in Miami for unaccompanied minors, which they personally unaccompanied, where she currently remains in custody. The girl's mother, Katty Paul, told the Herald that finding out about her daughter's detention when she really lost everything. I thought losing my house was devastating, or having to relocate to a different island or country was devastating, said Paul, who arrived in the U.S. several days after her daughter. When I found out that they got her, my baby, there are no words. In order to get her daughter back, Paul has to go through a lengthy process of providing documentation proof of their relationship, and she said she only has until September 26 to do it before she's required to leave the country. A CBP spokesman told the Talking Points memo in an emailed statement on Wednesday that the agency made multiple attempts to contact the girl's family members but were unsuccessful. I don't know, maybe their phone was out because there was a hurricane and their house is flattened. Selfish, small-minded pieces. Anyway, the CBP exercises due diligence to guard against children exploitation and human smuggling during uncertainties created by natural disasters and emergencies, the spokesman said. When encountering minors, there are legal requirements that CBP must follow that are in place to ensure the safety of the child. NBC News reported later on Wednesday that the Trump administration will deny Bahaman evacuees temporary protective status, preventing them from living in the U.S. while they wait for the situation in their hurricane-stricken home countries to stabilize. It's the same program the administration tried to end for their immigrants from Haiti, Sudan, Nicaragua, and El Salvador last year, before President Donald Trump's infamous shithole comment torpedoed the attempt in court. I asked this multiple times on multiple videos, and I will continue to ask this now. Where the hell is the United States of America's humanity? Where? Where is it? Where is the good Christian values of the religious right on this? Where are the good Samaritans on this? Is power so important that what you claimed were your values before Trump can be skirted aside, it can be negotiated away for the power of your party. It's bad enough that the right and left are so polarized now that we no longer have the days where Tip O'Neill could call President Reagan after they fight all day in politics, but at night they can still have a good conversation as gentlemen, as colleagues in politics. Gone are those days. You can barely see the contempt on Republicans and Democrats alike when they address each other in congressional sessions on C-SPAN or senatorial sessions on C-SPAN. I kind of wish we would go back to the parliamentary system in Britain. At least they're honest when they shout, when they bring up their issues, and they point the finger at the person that they're talking with, which usually is Boris Johnson. There are so many issues that is tacked onto this in this broad stroke. I mean, I'm not going to get into it directly or go into detail of it, but the notification that deathly ill people who came in on medical dispensation was going to be kicked out of this country in 33 days to go back to force to go back to their countries where they won't get the treatments for their illnesses and conditions that will end up killing them because of it. You know, one of those issues where we're not paying attention because we're too busy up here with Trump being racist and being an asshole. That's our headlines. While down here, they have 33 days to get the hell out of this country. Or if they don't, we'll force them out, and then they go. With none of the treatment that they can find in their own countries. I mentioned it in the last video of the poor guy who wasn't even born in Iraq, who was the son of Iraqi nationals, who got deported. Didn't speak a word of Arabic. Had diabetes. Could not get the medication. And died. And is now returned, or is returning back to his country that he was born to, the United States, for burial. Shall we, if you all... I know after this got revealed, because some of these people, including the courageous young lady who was on that medical trial that came to our country because of that medical trial, that because of her involvement in that medical trial not only saved her life, but saved other people's lives with her condition, that she went to Congress today for. If she was sent back to Guatemala, she will die. Now, as I said, this became public and public pressure came out, so temporarily there's a stay as they figure out what they're going to do. Trump administration never said a word about this, about they were going to do this. It took her, this young lady, to show the news, or local news, the letter that she had to leave the country in 33 days. Had she not done that, had those other people who also received letters did not step up, they would have been gone, they would have died, and we would have known none of this because we're too busy obsessed with goddamn Trump's tweets, or what antics he's doing to draw headlines, to draw the news, to talk about him. And then to criticize the news if they criticize him, even beloved Fox News. To him who's betraying him. He's betraying the American people, and what he means by that is him. Because he doesn't give a shit about the American people. No matter how many people stand up and support him, he doesn't support you. You are useful pawns to buy his merch, to stay in the rallies, to lose your humanity in the mob so that you can act like fools in front of the cameras as you flick off the news media that he says is the fake news, that you curse at and you spit at. And then you go home to your families. It's like purge night, only you're not killing people. Yet. Yeah, you go back home to your normal lives, and that was just all fun entertainment. That was being with the dancing bear. That was a rock concert. You know, I'll get into detail about that, about these immigrants who are just here to save their lives, and through their trials and treatments is helping other people. You know, we can get into the conversation about Maria Isabella Busso, who is the figurehead. She's the one that spoke. She's the one that got the attention. She's brave. She's courageous for how she's trying to maintain her life in this country. And one thing I'll mention about her being in Congress, while she tells her story, all the Republicans in that room, in that congressional panel, all they can talk about is the border. An open border. And what would that mean? And not ask her one simple question about her condition. Ask her what would happen to her if she was deported back to Guatemala. Alright. That is enough for now. But I'm not done with this. My urge to rant is beyond risen. It's burst through the ceiling. Now, I'm going to change gears because I'm going to watch the Democratic debate, and I may do a video on that, and maybe I'll be in a better frame of mind. However, that's not going to last because I'm not done with any of this. Not done with any of this. Alright. I appreciate those of you who've watched these. Thank you. You know, I'm small, but I'm growing. And hopefully I'm getting better. But I appreciate you taking the time out to watch me vent. Y'all have a good night. At this point, good morning. And I will see you later. The ranter rants because the urge to rant is rising. Good evening.